What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm Jeremy Versillo, and joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing on this busy pseudo-Christmas Eve trade deadline night?
You say Christmas Eve, but with the way everything's going is that I'm just happy that all of the trades are happening. Well, yesterday and today, I actually had my Friday. I was planning of moving out all these chores to different days just so I could be near a computer for most of Friday. And it looks like I'll be able to just do whatever I want because the only trades that haven't happened, there's some that are haven't happened, but have been reported basically done. Unless there's some random left field out ones. We basically have most of it here today.
That's true. Most of the top of the trade board has been traded already. So maybe there'll be a big surprise tomorrow, or maybe we'll just be a little bit bored. If you're new here, Short Shifts is a twice-weekly check-in between the ginormous Sunday evening episodes of Keeping Karlsson, designed to keep you up to date with fantasy news, takes, and analysis all throughout the season. With that, let's get into the big news everyone's been waiting for at the trade deadline. It sounds like Phil Kessel is on track to sign with Vancouver.
Oh yeah, I'll be perfectly honest, is that until that tweet bubbled up, I forgot that he's been I'm not sure if he's on a PTO or just hanging out by the hot dog stand there, but just kind of around there. And then that tweet kind of came up. But the big thing is just to kind of understand why this is happening is that a player needs to be on the roster before the trade deadline happens for them to be allowed to be in the playoffs. So technically you might see a random trade or random call-ups and stuff like that happen post-deadline. That's why they're allowed to happen. It's just that they're not allowed to be on into the postseason. And obviously if they're going to sign Kessel, they want him for the whole road. So this is why you're hearing stuff bubbling up. It'll be interesting to see, especially with, rumors of Lindholm and all the shuffling around to see if he gets signed, what actually happens.
Exactly. Actually, the trade deadline, you are still allowed to trade after. The players just can't play for the rest of the season. So you'll occasionally see some prospect moves or some injured reserve type moves after the trade deadline. Even last year, there were a couple smaller trades. But we teased you a bit there. We're not going to get to the trade deadline talk until a little bit later. Let's start up with the news and notes today. A couple big outjuries. Travis Konecny is back for Philly, and Freddie Andersen, the long-lost goaltender in Carolina, has been feeling good enough from the blood clotting issue he was experiencing and is starting tonight, and I believe has a 2-1 lead in the third period, so a pretty good start. Anything important on these two, or is it just kind of put them in your lineup?
Yeah, for them specifically, nothing to add other than that. But the big thing that I noticed is that Konecny is not with Couturier. Couturier is with Atkinson and Delorier on this fourth line again, by the looks of it. And Konecny is with Frost and Farabee. And then the rest of what I would call the top six is Lawton, Forrester, and Tippett. So while Konecny looks to be good, it just is another sign that Couturier seems to be defensive player mode for the rest of the season, or at least for short-term notice.
Definitely does look like that. Couturier has not really been fantasy relevant for the second half of this season, so I think it's safe to move on. I'm very curious what happens with Freddie Andersen, how many starts he gets. Kochetkov was very good in his time, and they also have Spencer Martin, and no longer have Antti Raanta, as we'll get to a bit later. He was sent down, waived this morning. Maybe we'll get claimed by a goalie-hungry team, like maybe even Philadelphia. Other injury news. Adrian Kempe was on the ice prior to practice, and McTavish and Zegras practiced in full gear. I'm not sure if that means full contact or not, but sounds like those three guys are inching closer to a return, so keep your eye on them if they got dropped by a desperate team. Additionally, we have a couple new injuries. Nick Seeler, who was originally going to be a potential trade deadline target, is now week to week with an injury, so I doubt he gets traded to a playoff contender. He's just going to hang out in Philly and rehab this injury. Thomas Chabot got hurt last night. I believe it happened near the end of the game. It looked like he twisted his knee a bit while actually taking a penalty. He was kind of sitting in the box, groaning and wincing. No news on how serious it is. If it is serious, that's a nice boost to Sanderson and Chabot. And last but not least, Gabriel Vilardi is not in the lineup for either Friday or Saturday this weekend. He's been day-to-day traveling with the team, but unfortunately they've already announced he will not play. What do you have on these guys, Shams?
So really the thing is that like for Seeler, as he also, if I remember correctly, signed a 4-year deal, so he's probably set there for the long term, unless someone, we've seen weirder things this trade deadline. But that, and also an interesting thing to add on just kind of talking about Winnipeg is it sounds like there's a flu bug going around, and there's talking about Hellebuyck as well having that. So we'll have to keep an eye out with how the goalie works. So maybe it's a potential situation of maybe Brossoit getting extra starts. But really right now it's just more of a, Chabot kind of always injured. The other two wait and see, and then keep an eye out for Hellebuyck as well.
Yeah, the coach did say that Hellebuyck's illness may affect how they do goalie starts this weekend. I'm unsure if that means that Brossoit may get both games, or if it's just hey, he may get the first one to give Hellebuyck a bit more time to rest. Also, that means there's a chance the rest of the team could start coming down with flu-like symptoms. I know a bug like that has been in a few locker rooms already this year. One more injury-related news. Jake Guentzel is practicing in a non-contact jersey, but he's also been in a bunch of trade rumors. Why don't you give us the rundown on what's going on with Jake Guentzel and where we may see him next?
So the nice thing is just to kind of first go with Guentzel is, if I remember correctly, he's on, I believe, LTIR, or at least the idea is that he's not able to come back until March 10th. And the nice thing is that I don't believe he's been practicing at all, like, say, in the game or like with the game lineups, but he has been skating a lot. So there is a potential that maybe if it's not the 10th exactly, it's not like one of those situations where, hey, it could be 3 weeks out from now. I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhere close around that 10th. And then the nice thing on top of that is that it sounds like, at least, insiders could be wrong, but everything's bubbling up with him going to Carolina. With the idea is that basically the idea will be is Bunting has been held out of the game today for trade reasons. Quote, the team. So basically the idea would be is supposedly Dubas guy goes back to Pittsburgh, and then Guentzel would be there, and then picks and other stuff happens. But the interesting thing is that you might already know the answer, because we're stuck here waiting, because they say, hey, they're playing games right now, so they're waiting on actually finishing the deal until after the game. So we'll wait and see. But as of now, everyone's kind of did the outline and pencil of this trade, and we're just waiting for them to color it in with pen.
Yeah, the Carolina Hurricanes seem to be the front runner currently. Like you said, there's a good chance the listeners know where Guentzel is going and what the full trade is by tomorrow morning when they listen to this. Sounds like Bunting is part of the package, which kind of fits what Pittsburgh wants to do. It sounds like Pittsburgh wants some older prospects or some almost NHL-ready guys to kind of extend their window with Crosby and Malkin, under the assumption that they wouldn't be able to re-sign Guentzel. And everybody knows that Bunting is eligible for the Calder for like his 7th consecutive year, as the joke goes. Jokes aside, though, the other teams that were potentially in on it are the Rangers, the Golden Knights, the Canucks, and the Panthers. Maybe something happens and that deal falls through and Guentzel ends up elsewhere. Sounds like it's going to be done today, or obviously tomorrow would be the last possible day, but it sounds like this is 100% happening, is what I'm hearing here. With that, let's go to a short break, and we'll give you the rest of the trade rundown when we get back. Welcome back, everyone. As we mentioned earlier, it's kind of Christmas come early here with all of the trades that happened today and yesterday. It's almost like the trade deadline isn't on Friday anymore. It would be, I think you said this in our Short Shifts chat, it would be really funny if all the GMs conspired to make their trades a day early, so the live coverage by Sportsnet all day tomorrow has nothing to talk about. I would be quite entertained with that. As far as the specific players, let's quickly run through a handful of players who were demoted or held out for asset management purposes, as in probably going to be traded or might be traded. Carolina sent Antti Raanta, Tony DeAngelo, and Brendan Lemieux to waivers. Don't know if any of them will get claimed, but it was directly said in the tweet for maximum flexibility going into the trade deadline. And, with them potentially getting Guentzel, as we mentioned before the break, that makes a lot of sense. You want all the roster spots and a bunch of the cap space with, 3 less players on your roster to add that big cap hit in Jake Guentzel. Other guys who were held out of games for potential trade reasons, Jason Zucker for a second time, Michael Bunting, who we mentioned earlier, Matt Dumba, Alex Barabanov, and actually Tyler Toffoli. I couldn't get a read on whether Toffoli was actually in a trade rumor or it was related to them needing roster space or something for someone else. But that one struck me as kind of odd. Do you have anything on that one in particular or anything else to say on these guys, Shams?
So for Toffoli, it was kind of a weird, is that it wasn't from an insider, it was from beat reporter. I forget her name, the one that handwrites all the actual lines. She was talking about how, because the GM effectively said, or not effectively, he literally said, we're not shopping Toffoli, but it sounds like people are calling for Toffoli, and it's the GM's job to listen. So I think the idea is that people are kind of the same idea with how Lindholm was going down, is that everyone's trying to get Guentzel, and then the idea is that once Guentzel gets traded, everyone's going to be like, oh crap, I didn't get Guentzel. Who's the next best forward? And Toffoli's out there, even if they're not trying to get rid of him. And then if a team's desperate enough, I could see him possibly getting moved. It's not one of those, hey, this is going to happen for sure at the deadline. It's how I'm reading it.
Gotcha, and that makes sense that GMs are calling because Toffoli is a very good winger on an expiring contract and on a non-playoff team that his cap hit is pretty affordable too. So he'd be a great addition to just about any team out there who's looking to make a deep playoff run. But now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the trades in roughly order of relevance to fantasy, I think. First up, we've got Vladimir Tarasenko got traded to the Florida Panthers, and he is playing in tonight's game. He was on the first line with Barkov and Reinhart, on the second power play unit, which features a cast of pretty good players. And the return for Tarasenko was only a draft pick, I believe. It was kind of low, but it sounds like he had a no trade clause that he was only willing to move to go to Florida. So sounds like Ottawa kind of got screwed there. What's the impact here, Shams, as far as the Panthers and the Senators?
So from the Panthers' viewpoint, I kind of view him the same way I viewed Rodrigues at the start of the season, is that he's in the top 6. I love it. He's in the bottom 6. I don't care. And I'd be willing to move him out. Maybe with a Tarasenko, if he spends a game in the bottom 6, I won't be quick to release him. But if it sounds like he's, they don't like the way this happens, because I'm not sure if they're winning right now. It's a close game that they maybe shuffle things around. I will be kind of keeping an eye out. And the nice thing is with that second power play, it's something interesting is that Tkachuk is kind of playing the Ovi role, is that he actually is playing both power plays. So even though it's the second power play, you're with Tkachuk, and also you have Bennett there, which is a strong player. So, this second power play unit is probably better than, some of the lingering first power plays. So that is something I'm really interested in as a Tarasenko manager. As long as he stays on that top 6, right now I think he has a shot, a hit, and a block, but it's one of those Philly games where I feel like they're more shutting down play than. So I'm not going to put too much weight on this game. And then on the other side, it's kind of opens up a little bit, is that with, no matter how many players they have, the Sens love to roll 3 lines, but right now for me, it's only a top 6. And then Joseph is the one that kind of gets promoted into that with playing with both Pinto and Brady Tkachuk. So with that idea is that I feel like out of the whole thing is that depending on how you feel about the Senators, I feel like Joseph is a winner out of that trade. And then we'll have to see is that Bennett and just that whole top 6 is probably the people I'm interested in from a forward standpoint.
I agree with you that Joseph is a pretty big winner out of the trade. I think Tarasenko's probably the biggest winner still, assuming he stays on that top line second power play slot that he was given. Ottawa was running a top 9 where he was getting shuffled down to some lesser line mates at times, even though he was still performing pretty well. I think some of the losers of the trade are Ridley Gregg and anybody else who finds themselves on Ottawa's third line now. That's not going to go well. And Evan Rodrigues is definitely a big loser of this trade, as I doubt he ends up back in the top 6. He had actually fallen out of the top 6 in favor of Nick Cousins, of all people, earlier this week. And now with Tarasenko there, I don't think we're going to see any top 6 Evan Rodrigues for the rest of the season. Next up, we have the big defenseman name who moved. Noah Hanifin got traded to Vegas. Vegas just seems to get all of the big name deadline acquisitions every year. There's also rumors that he may be extended for another 7 years, which is kind of crazy that Vegas just keeps figuring out how to do this under the cap. They're a incredibly well-run organization, I think. I think this trade hurts Hanifin's value, though, for fantasy. He's now behind both Theodore and Pietrangelo for offensive minutes. He wasn't exactly first in line in Calgary, but was getting that opportunity. To me, it reminds me a bit of Orlov in Carolina this offseason, where he went from playing 22 to 23 minutes a night in Washington and Boston last year to only playing 17 minutes a night and no more power play 2 when he moved to Carolina. All of a sudden, his periffs went down because he's playing 5 less minutes a night, and he's not getting points on the power play anymore, and has not been fantasy relevant all year. Hanifin, I think, will be a bit better than that, but I'd be surprised if he's like a season-long hold for the 2 or 3 weeks remaining for us.
So the interesting thing is that now we'll have to wait until the lines come out, because I see there's some talk is that Hanifin said he's going to play with Pietrangelo, but the interesting thing is that I believe both of them are on power play 2. So I don't know if he's talking about that or if he's playing with Pietrangelo as well on the top unit. So that would be an interesting thing, because if they're paired together and he's power play 2, it could be an interesting thing of just, being on the ice a lot. And it could be one of those situations where they play a top 4, just let the bottom pair, sit around and do nothing. But that's going to be kind of keep in mind, because I'm with you, is that this is a potential of, being behind both Pietrangelo and Theodore for like power play and offensive minutes. But there is a chance that if he gets paired with Pietrangelo on even strength, they're going to be in a situation. I saw kind of some advanced stats say that the way Hanifin plays is something that a lot of defensemen on that team don't. So it could be a situation where he might find a way on his ice a lot, but there is that situation where could easily turn into an Orlov situation. But if he seems like a unique player, he might be able to weasel in. So maybe, depending on your matchups or whatnot, if you have him, I would be tempted to hold just to kind of see how he's played. It's not like a clear cut, but I would be, say, if you're in a shower league and you see him in the waiver wire, I wouldn't be rushing. It's kind of one of those wait and see moments in my eye.
Wait and see for sure. I will say it does sound like he's playing with Pietrangelo. If he happens to be playing on power play 2 with Pietrangelo in a 2D type of setup, because Vegas is kind of thin at forward with some of their injuries, that's one where okay, that could be interesting if he's still seeing 20-something minutes and is playing on a better team and still playing power play 2. So I'll be keeping an eye on him. I should mention that we're recording this before Vegas has started their game today, so we haven't seen any power play units or line combinations other than what's been reported from practice. So a little bit more speculation on this end.
Yeah, so one little thing to add. So this is from the practice, and talking about the lack of forwards. So he is on power play 2 with Pietrangelo, but here are the forwards that are manning that unit. Barbashev, Roy, and Mantha. Nothing against those players, but when you think of Vegas, you don't think of those 3 forwards. So it's one of those situations where, as we talked about, Florida's power play 2 not, being a downgrade. This is clearly a downgrade versus the first one.
You're right. That is a pretty rough looking power play 2. And with Guentzel seemingly going to Carolina, I'm not sure there's another forward on the market that Vegas could be after. Seems like Jordan Eberle's name has kind of fallen out of the rumors in the past couple days. So that market may kind of be done now, and they aren't going to get anybody for that power play too. You posed an interesting question in our little Trello board here. How many defensemen need to leave Calgary for us to need to worry about Markstrom, who's having a fantastic season?
Yeah, this is kind of the interesting thing is that one of the first steps, I believe, it was like earlier past season, it was like, oh, the Daryl Sutter play, that's why Markstrom's great. And then after, even with the new coach, he's kind of had a situation, but like you're taking away so many defensive players. So the way I look at it is either there's 2 outcomes of this. If you're gutting out the defensive core, either Markstrom's going to be worse or the offensive forwards are going to be worse because they're going to play more defensively because they don't have the defensive back end. So that is kind of just a scary thing to think of. And I'm talking about this when it is 6-3 against the Lightning in favor of the Flames. So, anything can happen in one game, but it is kind of a thing to keep in mind is that we've lost. Don't forget, Zadorov was also there. So Zadorov, and then now Hanifin and Tanev. So that's 3. And they were probably, 3 of the top 4, and you maybe throw in Uyghur because, like, nothing against Andersen, but I view it more if it's the offensive guy. So that's almost like a whole 6 unit just gone from a team.
I challenge you to name 3 of the 4 defensemen Vegas is playing on their bottom 2 pairings currently. Not Vegas, sorry. Calgary.
This is purely a guess. Is Osterley still there?
He is not in the lineup tonight.
Okay, then I could not tell you unless one of the, or actually, I'm blanking on the name, but I'm guessing it's like Hanley because I keep on thinking it's Harley when he was with Dallas, but now he's with I believe it was a waiver pickup. That's the only person I could probably name, and that's more just because of the news and not the team.
You are correct. It's a waiver pickup. Joel Hanley. Braden Pacal, who I forget if he was traded or was a waiver pickup from Vegas earlier this year. Oliver Shillington, who recently returned from mental health leave. And Gilbert, and I forget his last name, so I'm not going to try to guess it. I know he's been in the lineup some, kind of a third pairing banger guy. But yeah, that's kind of what Calgary's rolling out in front of Markstrom. I think it's good for Uyghur and Andersen. They're going to see a lot of ice time. Markstrom's going to see a lot of shots. Not sure if that's good or not. Usually I think it's good for a goalie, but it could turn bad pretty quick. Next up, we have the Edmonton Oilers addition presumably for their top 6, Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick, who is less relevant. Sounds like Henrique is playing with Draisaitl and Kane today, and the coach said that he'll play either second line left wing or third line center, and knowing how often why am I stuck on Vegas? Knowing how often Edmonton rotates up their lines, I think it's very likely we'll see him playing a little bit of both. Any interest in Henrique in Edmonton here?
Well, the funny thing is you say that they've already put their lines in a blender. I'm not sure if they came back yet, but they're somehow got themselves in a 3-0 hole against Columbus of all teams. And Henrique was actually centering the third line with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Vogel, with you could arguably say is the second line because the way they had the second line is McLeod with Kane and Perry. So basically do the old, hey, we're losing, let's put McDavid and Draisaitl together and have Hyman as the third there. So really for me is that, honestly, I remember back in fantasy when we're talking about, Yamamoto or Puljujärvi, it's that I've kind of given up at this point for a long-term perspective of just trying to get the non-big player pick up, basically when I say not a big player, the ones that you'd actually never see on the waiver wire. So basically, if I wasn't interested in Perry or Fogel or like those kind of guys, other than maybe like a 1 week or, a 2-game kind of stream. The way I look at it, Henrique is the exact same because they get into a weird situation. He's back on the third line. In this situation, he's lucky to be with RNH. Could easily be a nobody, and Kane could be like with RNH, and then he's with no one. So I'm kind of, deep leagues maybe, but I have no real interest in rushing to pick him up.
Same here. I just have been burnt too many times by Edmonton McDavid wingers or Draisaitl wingers that Henrique's a good player, but he's too much of a Swiss Army knife to really have an offensive impact, I think. And I assume you have no interest in Sam Carrick, who was relevant for stretches on the Ducks because he played on their power play units, but is probably a fourth line and penalty kill guy for Edmonton. Minor note here, the Ducks lines are getting ugly. I would be a bit afraid of their goaltending or anybody who's not like a proven performer on them. Kind of sucks with them having a good schedule, but man, until McTavish and Zegras are back, those are a lot of no-names in their second and third line.
Yeah, especially with like Carlson being injured as well. And right now it was like, I believe we were talking, like, I was like, do I really want to pick up Max Jones? And luckily I didn't, and I got Costa Spare. Usually I think the meme with me is that I'll take any forward over a defenseman. And right here now I'm talking about taking a defenseman over a forward to show the hint of just, ride your Killord who's going off, but like, unless you're desperate, I'm not interested in your Stromes or, random Ducks. I would take like an Adam Henrique over that in a, heartbeat versus random Duck if we're talking equivalency of games, but that's always the tempting idea is because the Ducks always have those off night games. But the way I look at it, same as defense. Hey, if you get 3 sub 1 point games, I'd rather have a goalie for one game that scores more than any of them combined.
Agreed. Last, well, not quite last because we had another one come in as we were starting the show. There was finally a swap that both teams get potentially fantasy relevant players. Casey Middlestat got traded to Colorado for Bowen Byram. The trade is 1-for-1. Seems like a new change in scenery for both players. I know Byram had expressed frustration being stuck behind Makar and Taze, although now he's stuck behind Dahlin and Power, so maybe not an improvement, but sounds like he was pretty excited to go there. Casey Middlestat probably ends up as the second-line center in Colorado, especially because Ryan Johansson hilariously got sent to Philadelphia to reunite with John Tortorella and promptly sent down to the minors. But I digress. Any interest in Middlestat or Byram, or are they both wait-and-sees for you?
So the interesting thing is I don't know if we have any power play information yet. Actually, interesting. Now, this is a little messy because Thompson is injured. It kind of happened late. Now, we don't know how long-term it is, but Thompson managers, have another thing to yell about. But right now, the interesting thing is that Byram is actually with Dahlin on the top pair, and it looks like both of them are together on a power play. I say a power play because it looks like the forwards were Tuck, Greenway, and Cousins. So basically the idea is I was hesitant because I think most of us were like, oh yeah, he goes from a defenseman heavy team where he's behind a couple of people, Taves and Makar. Now he's behind 2 other electric defensemen. But if he gets to be stapled on with Dahlin on even strength, and let's just say maybe he gets power play 2 time once Thompson's back, like that could be something interesting. And, with the history of people getting traded this year, of course, he scored on his first shot of the first game he's back. So 100% goal rate. So pick him up now. But the idea is that if he's there, I would a lot more interested than I was prior. And that's actually kind of a surprising thing. I wasn't expecting this. And then on the Avs side is that the way I'm kind of internalizing this is that I kind of look at it the same way as how Tampa Bay got Hagel. Basically, the idea is that this is not like a top piece, but it's going to be a person that's going to be playing on the second line, going to be very valuable there long term. Hopefully, I would expect him to have a long term contract if what's not done already. And then the idea is that we'll have to see it through the power play, but is this going to be kind of awkward because, well, we'll see what Nikushin comes back. He'll actually get to play with one of him or Lehkonen, and then unless something weird happens, usually they keep Rantanen and McKinnon together. So maybe there might be a downgrade of that. While obviously the Avalanche have better players, he had a chance when he was with Buffalo to actually play with some of the higher caliber guys. So that was a wait and see, but I feel like it could be an interesting thing of just a situation if he somehow sneaks to the top power play, or once he gets the team gets more fully healthy, has better wingers. Could be a really interesting kind of long-term thing, because one last thing to keep in mind is that he was actually, and part of this is due to injury, he was the top scorer, and when I say scorer, assists and goals for Buffalo before leaving. So he does have the propensity to get points.
I am shocked that he was the leading point scorer for Buffalo, but I guess with Thompson having been injured for a bit, and Dahlin, I forget if he was injured or if he just hasn't been himself so far, but that is shocking. But next trade, Anthony Duclair got traded to Tampa Bay for draft picks. I'm actually kind of interested in this one. I think he'll slide into the top 6. He's shown an ability to put the puck in the net when playing with good players, such as, when he was in Florida, he was pretty good, and he's had flashes on just about every team he's played on. Am I overreacting here, or are you kind of interested in Duclair too?
So this is kind of the way I look at it, and this is with us having less information. I kind of look at him the same as Tarasenko, is that if he's in the top 6, I am very interested because hell, even if he's with Cirelli as a center, but if they have like Stamkos as the center as they do sometimes, and he gets to play with one of those kind of guys as a top 6, that's really interesting. But if he's like bottom 6 and then like just second power play, it's like one of those all or nothing. So we'll have to wait and see. But right now, unless you're in a deep league, I wouldn't be rushing to add him. And probably if you're in a league like a deepish league, my opponent in Kessel actually already has him because of his schedule when he was with the Sharks.
Well, that's all we have time for today. I'm going to run through a handful of the non-fantasy relevant trades that happened, and I'll give you a quick second if you think any of them were fantasy relevant. Joel Edmondson to Toronto, Anthony Beauvillier to Nashville, Alex Wenberg to the Rangers, Sean Walker to Colorado, Brandon Duhaime to Colorado, Troy Stetcher to Edmonton, and Yakov Trenin to Colorado. And then there was a prospect swap between Anaheim and Montreal those are pretty good prospects, so that one was interesting to me, but this is not the forum to discuss that. Any of those NHL trades fantasy relevant to you?
So the one that kind of interests me is Walker to Colorado because any defenseman with that kind of offensive power is going to be interesting. And then also they did talk about one of the aims to bring in Walker was to have Makar play less penalty kill minutes. So you can look at that either way of, hey, he's on the ice less, he could be more offensive, or hey, his bagger stats might be affected differently because he's not on the ice for those defensive minutes. But that is kind of the interesting thing there. So if he's kind of playing in a situation, I know this week was an interesting week for them with the Colorado schedule. But if there's another where they have like a 4-game week, depending on how he gets utilized, Walker might be an interesting part of getting the penalty kill ties, so getting hits and blocks, which he was doing well within Philadelphia, and then doing a dump off to Rantanen, and then he does magic and he somehow has an assist as well, and skittered through the rest of the games.
That is a good point. I will have to keep an eye on him over the coming weeks. Thank you everyone for joining us. Be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK, as well as Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Please use www.gamedaytweets.com to get all the best info from Twitter without having to dig through the rest of the site. It includes team by team and searchable tweets by player name. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, ShiftChart.com, Icy Data, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and John Reed is our digital media producer. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.